Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today's class we're focusing on learning how to do a headstand, learning the pose Sirsasana. We won't use a lot of yoga equipment. Make sure that you have got some access to yoga blocks. Importantly, make sure that you've got access to a clear wall space. Make sure that you've got your mat directly up against the clear wall space. So in terms of priorities when learning a headstand, as the name suggests, we're standing on our head. We need to be able to do that while supporting our body weight and preventing our body weight from compressing the neck. So when we first start to learn a headstand, really we're developing strength and techniques that support and protect the neck. Good if we do that initially without the head being in contact with the floor. Eventually, once we have that strength, that confidence, we can start to place the head to the floor. But first few variations that we work with, our head will be off the floor. Let's get to them now. And some people might know the pose by its title of Dolphin pose, but really it's a Sirsasana preparation. We've got our elbows bent, our forearms to the floor, and our fingers interlocked. Now, shortly we'll look at a more refined way of positioning the hands into a cup shape. For now, fingers interlocked right down to the bases and the heels of the hands close together, and that position really gives you a firm push down with the forearms, and that can help to generate lift up through the shoulders. If our shoulders are lifting, then that's a really good start in terms of supporting and protecting our neck. If our shoulders drop in this pose and in headstand, they tend to drop forwards being in the direction of the hands. So make sure that your shoulders are lifting up. More or less they sit directly over the elbows. Just to be really clear about that, knowing they tend to push forwards and drop, we'll sit them a little bit further back than that, so that the shoulders are a little bit closer to the wall behind than the elbows. And then maintaining that shoulder position without letting the shoulders push forwards or drop. Tuck your toes under, press your forearms down, and straighten your legs, raising your hips up. Just feel it for yourself. As soon as we straighten the legs and lift our hips, there is that tendency for the shoulders to drop. And then bend your knees back down to the floor. We'll do that just a couple of times. Forearms press down, checking the shoulder position, and without disturbing the shoulder position, straighten your legs and lift your hips up. In order to maintain that lift through the shoulders, we need to press the floor away with the forearms. And release down again, knees to the floor. So we're gradually building strength and confidence with this movement, pressing the forearms down, lifting through the shoulders, straighten your legs, raise your hips up. Now, unlike dog pose, we're not here pressing our heels down towards the floor. Allow your heels to lift up. Notice when you do that, your hips start to lift higher, and we really are wanting to get that sense of bringing our hips more directly over our shoulders. Let's release down. So we're gradually getting more and more accustomed to being in an upside down position with our pelvis over our shoulders, over our head. Now we switch the interlock now. Now most of us will just naturally have one of the index fingers that comes on top. So make sure that you switch to the other way of interlocking the fingers. And again, just checking that the elbows are remaining shoulder width, checking that the shoulders are lifting, maintaining that lift, and straighten your legs. Lifting your hips up, pressing the forearms down, and be really clear. Make sure that your head is completely off the floor. It should be possible to, with your eyes, look down at the floor there between the forearms. Let's rest down for a moment, knees to the floor, and pressing your forearms down, lifting up through your shoulders. Exhale and raise up, pressing your forearms down, lift up through the shoulders, release down, and keeping this interlock, we'll go one more time. Just watch that tendency when you straighten your legs for your elbows to splay out. So we're pressing the forearms down, also adding a containing movement where we squeeze the elbows a little towards the center of the mat so that they're not splaying out wider as our legs straighten. Exhale, pressing the forearms down, raise up without the elbows splaying. Make sure your shoulders are lifting. Also use your leg strength here as well.
So kneecaps are firm, the muscles at the front of the thighs gripping, and the pelvis lifting upwards towards the ceiling. Okay, and then release down. Let's revert back to the original interlock. And I alluded to it there, that connection of the shoulders lifting, but also the pelvis lifting. So it's not just the shoulders we're aiming to lift here, it's the whole body. We need to support the whole body weight and prevent it from compressing the neck. So this time let's focus not just on the shoulders, but on the sides of the ribs and that bit of the spine that's positioned between the shoulder blades. Make sure that those areas are lifting. So toes tuck under, forearms press down, making sure that your shoulders are lifting, straighten your legs, pressing your forearms down, side ribs lift up, and that bit of the spine between your shoulder blades. Move it into the body and lift it upwards with the pelvis. Okay, and then release down. And let's change the interlock over. So switching to the opposite index finger being on top. And repeat. Press down with your forearms and raise up. Forearms press down. We're lifting through the shoulders. We're lifting the sides of the ribs up. And that bit of the spine between the shoulder blades, moving it in and lifting it upwards. Okay, and then release down. Now just as a transition pose, bring your hips back to your heels. Straighten your arms, have your hands shoulder width, and let your forehead release towards the floor. Look to the screen if you're not sure of the pose. Virasana forwards, Adho Mukha Virasana. So most of the attention there and the technique directed at what the arms are doing, making sure that the shoulders are lifting. Also important that our legs are working. This time we'll come back to the pose and we'll see if we can walk in a little closer with the feet towards the elbows. That'll lift our hips higher. And again, just getting us a little closer to the eventual inverted position. We want to make sure that we can maintain the lift in our shoulders as we do so. So let's come back to our initial interlock. Check that your elbows are under your shoulders. Tuck your toes under. Straighten your legs. Pause there for a moment. By pressing the forearms down, make sure that your shoulders are lifting. And then without losing that lift in the shoulders, 1 foot at a time, just walking that little bit closer towards the elbows. See if the heels now can lift a little higher as you come more towards the tips of the toes, but without dropping your shoulders. Forearms press down. Be even clearer still, that bit of the forearm near the wrists press down. Notice the lift you can generate from that region of the forearm. And then step your feet back to where they started and release your knees back down to the floor. Change your interlock. And so bear in mind, we are looking to accumulate strength with this. So good if you get that sense that the muscles are being challenged. We want to use this sequence of movements to increase our ability to lift and support our body weight with our arms. Forearms press down without dropping the shoulders. Straighten your legs. Pause there for a moment. Check that your shoulders are lifting. And then 1 foot at a time, walk in a little closer with the feet towards the elbows, but without your shoulders dropping. Press the forearms down. That bit of the forearm near the wrist press down. And be really clear, that region of the spine between the shoulder blades, move it into the body and lift it upwards with the pelvis towards the ceiling. Okay, and then release down. Have a rest for a moment. Hips back to heels, arms extend forwards, forehead towards the floor. So walking in that little bit closer with the feet towards the elbows, it helps to get the hips more over the shoulders. It gives that little bit more of a sense of what it feels like to be upside down. The other thing that we can do there, just to nudge it a little further in the direction of an inversion, we can make use of our wall and we'll step our feet up the wall. So we're aiming to step our feet up the wall to the point where our legs are parallel with the floor.
Good here if we measure our distance that we need to be away from the wall. And we'll measure a leg's length distance. I'm doing it now. If you sit with your knees straight and your feet against the wall, and just feel where your sitting bones are in terms of making contact there with your yoga mat. Roughly where your sitting bones are is going to be that region of the mat where the elbows will now be positioned. Now, if you know that you're working with tighter upper back, tighter shoulders, tighter hamstrings, you may need to increase the distance, but maybe a good starting point being more exactly on a leg's length away from the wall, and then you can always adjust if you need to. So elbows a leg's length away from the wall. Let's just come back to the shoulder position again. Rather than letting the shoulders push forwards or drop, we're lifting them up and a little bit back. So the shoulders slightly closer to the wall behind us than the elbows. Pressing the forearms down, maintaining that lift in the shoulders. Straighten your legs. Make sure you can find the wall with your heels. Don't yet step up the wall. First of all, just check that you're getting that lift through the shoulders, through the side ribs, through the bit of the spine there between the shoulder blades. Maintaining that lift there. Then 1 foot at a time, step up the wall. And then the foot that has come up the wall, press it into the wall and bring the other foot up to meet it with the feet together. Make sure that your heels can press firmly into the wall and press your forearms down to lift up through your shoulders. And use your legs as well. Thighs lift upwards towards the ceiling. Okay, release down and change the interlock. And we'll go again. So it's more that we're just supporting the pose from underneath with the arms. This time see if you can do all of the lifting work with the legs. So anchoring with the arms, but using your leg strength to lift up through the shoulders, through the spine, all the way to the pelvis. Lifting the body weight against the effect of gravity. Raise up, find the wall. Now I didn't mention it on that first side. If you're unable to maintain that lift in your shoulders, it might be that you're too close to the wall. You might need to move a little further out. Maintaining that lift through the shoulders, 1 step at a time, bring the feet up the wall. Make sure your heels can press back into the wall. Push down with the forearms, but lift up with the thigh bones. Where the thigh bones join the hips, lift upwards. Okay, and then release down and Ardha Mukha Virasana. Arms forwards, elbows straight, and the forehead resting down to the floor. So in today's tutorial, we're going to move reasonably quickly from those preparatory movements to some of the next stages of getting closer to a headstand. But it might be that if you're just starting work on a headstand, it might be that you're consolidating this work over a period of time. It might even be months before you progress to the next stages. And in terms of a class scenario, often yoga teachers will know when a student is ready to progress with their headstand if, in this position, they're able to lift and contain that region of the spine between the shoulder blades. It's really important that you're clear on what that feels like. This area of the spine here, just down from the base of the neck. When it's contained and lifting, it really has a nice supportive effect on the neck. Let's use a block now. Now I might just quickly demonstrate how the block will work. We're going to wedge a block between that part of the upper back that we're focusing on and the wall. Now, easy if someone's available to come and put the block in position for you, but good if we're independent with that and able to do it for ourselves with no one else around. The trick to it is the position of your elbows initially. You can see how close my elbows are to the wall. It's less than a block's length distance away from the wall. Now just stay watching for the moment. With my fingers then, I place the block up against the wall. Now don't be too concerned with height, just have your fingers in the middle of the block. Of course you can see I can move the block lower if need be, or take it up higher if need be.
the region of the back that we're looking to position the block into is above the base of the neck. Above meaning above in the direction of the pelvis. Now, in order to find the block with my back, I just do this. I've still got my knees to the floor. I'm confident now that I know where the edge of the block is, so I tuck my toes under and then straighten my legs. Now at this point, my upper back is holding the block in position. I'm less reliant on my hands. So I'll keep one to the block and sweep the other hand down to the floor. And the other hand can come down. I've interlocked the fingers. Notice again my head is completely off the floor. And notice when that part of my back is supported, I'm able to generate an improved lift from the floor up to my pelvis. Means I can walk in a little closer, lifting my heels, and now I'm really getting that sense of my hips being more directly above my head. Still my head is right off the floor here, it's not touching the floor at all. Okay, so let's try it. So block in both hands, the elbows near to the wall, so it's maybe 3/4 the length of a yoga block away from the wall. Make sure that you're, with your fingers and thumbs, just holding the block directly against the wall. There should be no angle on the block. Have it flush to the wall. And then just round your upper back so that you can feel where the block is. Remember, it's that last bit of the upper back before the neck where you want to have the block. You can fine tune that a little bit, lifting it up more or down more. It should feel nice and supportive and comfortable when in the right position. And let's now bring our knees off the floor and wedging that block into the wall with the upper back, and then sweeping the hands one at a time into that interlocked position. You've got your fingers interlocked right to the bases of the fingers. Make sure that your elbows have remained shoulder width. Now check the contact of the forearms as they press down. It's very common for the weight to gravitate more towards the elbows. Make sure you're using the whole of the forearm. So that region of the outer wrist, that last bit of the forearm before the hands, press down there. Notice how the shoulders, they start to improve their ability to lift upwards away from the floor. So keeping the forearms pressing down, try now walking in a bit closer with the feet towards the elbows. Lift your heels higher. Now a really nice adjustment to get in this pose is someone coming along with a belt or a rope, placing it in your thigh creases and with both hands firmly lifting the rope or the belt upwards towards the ceiling. In that sense, the pelvis, it's a little bit like the handle for the spine, a handle that lifts the spine up and away from the floor, up and against the effect of gravity. Press down with the forearms and use your legs to lift your pelvis upwards towards the ceiling. That region of the back where the block is, it's contained, it's brought in, and it generates lift when it is contained. Now to come out of the pose, just let your knees bend, the block will drop down. Put the block off to the side, just push yourself back a little bit away from the wall so that you have room to straighten your elbows in Virasana forwards. Forehead resting down to the floor. Ideally, the muscles in the arms, the upper back, the body generally now starting to get that sense that they've been doing some weight bearing. And I'll reiterate again, these are strength building poses and we need to gradually accumulate that strength and be confident that we have it so that we can then think about supporting our body weight on our head. We're not quite there at this stage though. Let's think now about being able to kick up and into the upside down position, the headstand position. We'll still initially do this without the head being in contact with the floor. And again, we just leave out the risk then of compressing the neck. Now, I'll show each of the stages and then we can work with them together. This first stage, as we've just done there, we've got the knuckles to the wall, our elbows under our shoulders. We tuck the toes under, and as we have been doing, We lift up as if that block was still there, containing the upper back. And then we'll keep the left foot to the floor. We'll raise the right leg up. And it doesn't matter how high you're lifting the leg, more important that that knee at the lifted leg is completely straight. Okay, let's work with that one now. So fingers interlocked, knuckles to the wall, elbows under your shoulders. Again, just that very slight incline with the upper arm. Move the shoulders that little bit further away from the wall than the elbows, knowing that the tendency is for the shoulders to push forwards as they drop. And then straighten your legs. Imagine that the block is still there in the upper back. Bring your feet in together so that they touch. Keep the left foot where it is and raise the right leg up. Make sure your hips stay level to the floor. It's common for the left hip to drop. So left outer hip lift up. Right kneecap, grip it. Make the leg completely straight. Get a clear sense of where the heel is. The right heel pointed upwards towards the ceiling. Okay, and then bring the foot back down and knees to the floor. Change your interlock over, bringing the other index finger on top. And we'll repeat, and this time we'll be raising the left leg up. Feet together, and then the left leg raised. Now, ideally at this point, you'll be feeling a little more comfortable with one of the legs lifting up. It'll feel more familiar, more comfortable than when the other leg lifts up. And just notice that at this point, because we might choose a preferred leg in a moment where we actually get to that kicking action. Kneecap straight, heel pointing upwards. Make sure you're pressing evenly down with both forearms. Okay, and then release down, have a rest. Hips back to heels, arms extend forwards. Now that last point, the forearms pressing evenly down. Don't just assume that you are doing that. Check and make sure. It's important because when we now start to add a kicking action, at that point when we kick off the floor, it's important that both forearms press evenly down, and that will enable us to kick directly up without toppling to either side. We're not kicking very far up at this stage, particularly if you're brand new to this. It might be that the foot comes only a little bit off the floor. I'll show it. Knuckles to the wall, the head's off the floor. We come to here, as we've just done, raising one leg up. We keep the knees straight and we just bend the opposite leg, and it's a hopping action. We just kick off and land with the same foot. The knees bent. Don't try to switch the feet over. Just kicking off and landing with the same foot. So fingers interlocked, knuckles to the wall. Now, really important, that point when you kick off, that you're evenly pressing the forearms down, not one more than the other. So start it now with the knees to the floor, right forearm, left forearm, evenly pressed down. Raise the legs up, forearms evenly pressing down. Raise the right leg up, keep the knees straight, and then kick off and land with the same foot. Kick off and land with the same foot. Go again. Kick off and land. Hopping action. Knees down. Change the interlock. We'll try the other leg. And a bit like most of us are right-handed or left-handed. A similar thing with kicking up into these poses. For some of us it's easier with the left foot leading, for others the right foot. It doesn't matter at this stage. We eventually come back and try to balance both of the sides, but good initially if we can just determine which is the easier side with which to kick up, and we'll focus on that side initially as we take the pose further. Raise your hips up, feet in together, left leg raise up, keep the knees straight, keep the heel pointing upwards towards the ceiling, and then kick off and land. Same foot, hopping action, kick off and land. Try to generate some momentum with that leg as it lifts off the floor. It should take your hips with you. One more go. Kick off and land, and then hips back to the heels and have a rest for a moment. And then maybe just good if I can show you at this point a couple of things that are very common that we're not able to get very far off the floor because our feet are so far away from our elbows. Notice when my feet are out here, where my hips are back and down towards the floor. It's very heavy then for me to get my hips to lift up. And then, so a good cue for that, just walking in that little bit closer. But then watch, as I kick up, there's a weight transfer from the kicking foot, this one that's now bent, into the forearms. And that enables me to be able to even touch the wall. We can think about eventually bringing both of the feet up that way. So let's try it. So fingers interlocked at this point. Rather than focusing on both of the sides, let's work with the side that comes more easily for you. So I'll leave that to you, which leg you're choosing. That's going to lead you up to the wall. We'll also at this stage keep the interlock the same. Important that eventually we get back and rebalance. So there's not one side that's stronger than the other, but initially headstand. Good if we can just make progress with the side that initially feels more comfortable. So knuckles to the wall. Elbows under the shoulders. Legs straight. Now this time we're looking to get a little bit more air time. We're doing it by walking closer in and lifting our hips higher up. There's less distance for them to travel now to the wall. Choose the leg that's going to lead you up. Keep it straight at the knee. Use the other leg like a spring. At that point of kickoff, press your wrists down. Outer wrist press down as you kick off. Press the forearms evenly down as you kick off. One more go. And then rest down. And let's just regather. Strengthen the arms, hips back to the heels. Arms extend forwards and the forehead resting down to the floor. And then just have a quick look. So something that is really common, working with groups of people that are learning this pose. The aim, in a sense, is to get contact with the wall, with our feet. So the tendency because of that is for this to happen, to kick up and to hook the knee, and that way we meet that objective of touching the wall with the foot. However, it's not so important that the foot comes to the wall. It's more important that we're using this leg to gain momentum to bring our pelvis to the wall. So when I do that, I'm keeping the knees straight. I'm making a big wide arc with the heel, and that helps me to generate the momentum to move my pelvis to the wall. So important that you're not bending the knee and hooking the foot to the wall. Good way of thinking about this, keeping the knees straight. Rather than hooking the heel towards the wall, think of moving the heel more directly, vertically up towards the ceiling. When you do that, quite naturally, there'll be a circular momentum that will move your body weight towards the wall. Be really clear, your head is still off the floor here. So ideally, no part of the forehead, no part of the skull in contact with the floor. Let's try your preferred interlock. Feel free also just to alternate if both sides feel fairly even. That's a really good thing. We don't want to lose that balance. So knuckles to the wall. Straighten your legs, raise up. A few goes, exhale and kick up. And making that big wide arc with the heel going straight up towards the ceiling. If you're managing to get both of the feet to the wall, just come straight back down, don't stay up. One more go. And then having a look here again to the screen. So at this stage, ideally, with some practice, you're managing with your head off the floor to get both feet to the wall. And important then that you're able to maintain lift up through your lower back. So I'll see if I can demonstrate it. We lift up. The tendency is for the back of the pelvis to drop towards the spine. And then I'm sliding my heels up the wall to regain that space into the lower back. Be ready. Fingers interlocked. Knuckles to the wall. Checking that your elbows are staying shoulder width. Raise up your pelvis. Exhale with the head off the floor. Kick both feet to the wall. Press your forearms down and slide your heels up the wall, lifting the back of your pelvis upwards with the feet towards the ceiling. Okay, and then release down and have a rest again. Hips back to heels. Arms extend forwards, Adho Mukha Virasana. So we're ready to think about now bringing our head down in contact with the floor. This variation that we'll work with next, the head won't be hard on the floor, but important that we know the exact part of the head that will eventually make contact with the floor in a headstand. So good at this point if we just become introduced to the crown of the head, and that crown of the head is literally just the very top part of the head, the tallest part of the body when we're standing up with good postural alignment. And often a way of determining that point, particularly if you're brand new to the pose, something that works for the majority of people, so try it and check that it works for you. We're going to bring the heel of the hand to the eyebrows, and then keeping the palm flat onto the skull, we reach with the middle finger, the longest finger of the hand, into the top of the head, and that is more or less the crown of the head. And if that feels a little bit arbitrary, you can even with the fingernail just scratch it a little bit, and that sensation then will linger, and it's that part of the head that we'll be looking to position down to the floor. As I've mentioned numerous times, important that we're not compressing the neck, and a really good way of determining whether you're able to support your body weight is if you have that control of the upper back, that area just down from the base of the neck. This block setup will help with that, and as I mentioned, some of you might not have the third block. Most of you practicing the video will have two blocks. So we're going to make this structure. We've got a flat block or improvised knobbles, books that will roughly conform to the shape of a block. We've got a tall block on those books or flat block, and then we're going to place the block this way. And this is the block that we'll be mainly concerned with. Really all we've done here is make a support that balances this top block and holds it in contact with the wall. And we won't be yet, we're going to look at it very soon, the cup shape with the hands. For this variation, we'll actually be gripping with the hands around the edge of that base block or stack of books that you might have there instead of the block. The back of the skull will come slightly away from the bottom block. I'll just quickly show it. So I'm placing the top of my head down to the floor and then walking in this position. And then I even have a little bit of time to just configure the top of the head so that I make sure that I am literally making contact with the floor with the crown of the head. The heels are lifting here so that I can get my hips as high as possible, as directly over the shoulders as possible. Let's try it. I'm going to stay in the pose and then you can join me. So placing the head to the floor, the back of the skull slightly away from the blocks. Both hands are gripping the blocks. You're keeping your elbows shoulder width, and then straightening your legs and using that block there as a support for the upper back. There's contact with the head to the floor, but it should at this stage be a light contact. There should be no sense of the shoulders the upper body sinking onto the neck and squashing it. Your shoulders lift and they spread as they lift. Pressing your elbows down helps to ensure that the shoulders remain lifting. Okay, and then let's release down. We've got that clear sense now of where the crown of the head is, and having the upper back supported tends to make quite a light contact there with the top of the head onto the floor. In a full headstand, we are letting the body weight bear down onto the top of the head. Roughly, it's 90% of the body weight that is let down onto the top of the head. The remaining 10% is what your arms are doing, the rest of your body doing in terms of lifting the body mass up and against the effect of gravity. So with 90% of the body weight onto the top of the head, important that we've got sufficient padding for the top of the head. So if you've got a hard floor surface, concrete, floorboards, then definitely you will be needing to add some extra padding. And a really common amount of padding initially is your yoga mat folded up in half and in half again. So that's like the equivalent to 4 yoga mats worth of padding. And maybe the first time it's good to try it that way, but increasingly it's good to have a little bit more of a sense of the hardness of the floor, because eventually you're going to be free balancing in a headstand. Not in today's tutorial, but eventually we're heading in that direction. We need to feel the firmness of the floor quite clearly in order to be able to balance. So a good eventual support there is the mat folded in thirds. So I'm going to stick with that third configuration. Notice how I've placed this extra yoga mat on this mat. If you have got access to 2 mats, that's a good thing to do, because it means that your feet have got good grip as you're walking in and kicking up into your headstand. It doesn't matter if you don't have the second yoga mat. Most people won't. Good though if you have got some grip for your feet. We don't want to feel the feet slipping or sliding on the floor when we're going to kick up. So I've mentioned already the cup shape that the hands make in this pose. Let's look at that a little more clearly now. Still we're interlocking the fingers. Maybe we'll just do it whilst we're kneeling here with your hands out in front. So you've got your fingers interlocked right to the bases of the fingers. The thumbs come together, and rather than having the tips of the thumbs touching, which over time tends to create tension and pushes the thumbs up and gets the hands in too close, good if we just relax the thumbs and cross them up at that region of the thumb up the top there where the thumbnail is. So one thumb is just lightly resting on the other thumb. The fingers, I've already mentioned, they're interlocked right to the bases of the fingers, but the fingers themselves are soft. We're not digging the fingertips into the backs of the hands. We're making a cup shape with the hands, so the heels of the hands are a little wider now. We've made a cup shape that roughly molds the back of the skull. So roughly molds the back of the skull. However, be really clear, when we place the head against the hands, it's not that we're bringing the skull all the way into that cup shape that we've made. The back of the skull just lightly touches the fleshy part of the thumb. It'll be easier if I show from the side. The hands a little bit away from the back of the skull. And again, that's important because eventually when we're free balancing, that's going to give us a little bit of extra ability not to topple backwards when the wall is not there. So there's a bit of a gap between the base of the little fingers and the back of the skull. Maybe just before we go further, and often hard to see the hands when someone is in the pose. The head often obscures the positioning of the hands and the wrists, but the inner wrist is the thumb side, and the outer wrist, here it's the little finger side. Important that the wrist is vertically stacked. Knowing that the wrist tends to splay, we're going to actually aim to keep the inner wrist, thumb side, slightly narrower than the outer wrist. And it will feel even a very gentle squeezing action with that side of the wrist on the back of your skull when we in a moment get the head into position. Let's go. We're ready now to work with our attempt to kick up into a headstand. And
A good guide is that you've already been able to kick both feet up to the wall. That's a good sign that you're ready to progress to this stage. If you're feeling a little insecure in terms of the sideways stability, good if we have someone there just to spot us and make sure that we don't topple sideways. The other thing you can do though is just move your mat right into the corner of a room, and the corner of the room then catches you and just gives you that little bit more security from a sideways orientation. In terms of going straight up, we've already mentioned it a couple of times, important that you press the forearms evenly down. If one is pressed down more than the other, that's when we tend to lean more to one side. Be ready. Fingers interlock. The fingers are interlocked right to the bases. We've got the thumbs crossed at the top. We've made a cup shape with the hands that roughly shapes the back of the skull. Make sure that the knuckles are lightly touching the wall. You've got your elbows directly under your shoulders and the wrist, so that the inner wrist, the thumb side, slightly narrower than the outer wrist, the little finger side. Now you might need to re-establish where the crown of the head is. Feel free to do so if you need. And then let's bring the crown of the head, the top of the head down in contact with the floor. We let the back of the skull lightly make contact with the bases of the thumbs. Now it's really common with groups of people, for people at this stage to think that they're on the top of the head, but in actual fact to have leant more towards the forehead and the eyebrow region. Something that can help with that if we bring the knees in closer to our face. And then just check again that you're directly on the top of the head. Now we're going to kick up, we won't stay up, we're just going to be a few seconds and then release back down. So forearms press down, make sure that you're lifting your shoulders, tuck your toes under, as if that block was still in the upper back, straighten your legs and walk in. You're bringing the back of your hips towards the wall, but moving your upper back in and away from the wall. Choose a leg that's going to lead you up towards the wall. Press both forearms down and exhale and kick up to the wall. Make sure that your shoulders are lifting. Make sure that the back of your pelvis is lifting. And now to come down, still the forearms evenly pressing down. One leg stays up, the other reaches down for the floor. And then we eventually come all the way back. So important that your first attempt at headstand, just a very brief attempt, we want to make sure that your neck is comfortable in doing that. If you find after a few seconds your neck feels uncomfortable, cramped, compressed, it's an indicator that you need to, for the time being, stick with the strengthening preparatory stages, and then in time you'll gradually at your own pace be able to comfortably do your headstand. Those of you that were able to be those few brief seconds there without any discomfort, if it felt good, if it felt that you might be able to stay that bit longer, we'll go up a second time and we'll look at some of the movements that will help to refine the pose and just add a few more improvements in terms of lifting body weight up and avoiding that sense of collapsing down onto the top of the head and the shoulders. So, fingers interlock. Move a little more quickly now, making that cup shape. Check the wrists. Check that the elbows are shoulder width. Crown of the head to the floor. Raise up. Walk in. Pressing your forearms down. Then come up to the wall. Keep your feet to the wall. So important initially that your shoulders are lifting. You press your forearms down. Make use of that part of the forearm near the wrist. So wrists press down. It lifts the shoulders up. As the shoulders lift, they need to broaden outwards and away from the center. It's a bit of a turning action involved there in the upper arm, so that the outer upper arms move forwards in the direction that your eyes are looking. Notice how that helps to spread the upper back and gives a nice even lift to both of the shoulders. The shoulders lift, the side ribs lift, the whole spine lifts. The back of the pelvis tends to drop. So move it in and lift it up. The buttocks contain, move in and lift up.
Keep your knees straight, the backs of your knees open. Bring the ankle joints together. Ideally, the inner ankles will touch here in this pose. And then keep the inner heels lifting and the big toe bases lifting. Anchor with your arms, pressing down into the floor with your forearms, but use your legs to lift your spine up. Again, think of the pelvis as being a handle for the spine and lifting it upwards and against the effect of gravity. There's a couple of last things to check. Make sure that your face is relaxed, so your jaw, your tongue, your eyes relaxed. Make sure that you can breathe evenly. Any sense of discomfort in the neck, you come down. Any sense of throbbing in the eyes, you come down. The whole temple region of the skull should feel nice and cool and calm. Okay, and then let's start to come down now, one leg at a time. And then to Vidasana forwards. So when you're learning headstand initially, you're spending more time with some of those preparatory strengthening variations, head off the floor, blocking the upper back, and then perhaps a short stay in the headstand once you get to that point. And then progressively you're spending longer periods of time in the headstand and less amounts of time working with the preparatory variations. It might be at this point, if you're brand new to the pose, that a good realistic goal would be gradually getting to a minute in a headstand. You can have a clock nearby so that you can check your time. Try to allocate though around about 5 minutes at this stage to your head balance practice time. It means that the other 4 minutes can be spent with the strengthening variations. Then you might, as you progress, start to work more towards a 2 minute, a 3 minute, a 4 minute headstand, and then supplementing that with some of the strengthening work. And then over time, at your own pace, you'll be confidently able to practice a headstand for 5 minutes and beyond. At that point, we'll be able to consider working with free balancing without the need of a wall. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial on Sirsasana on headstand. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.